All right, shifting our focus now to the future of South Carolina's energy needs. We know that there's going to be a significant need in the next couple of decades as this state's population continues to grow. There have been efforts going on now for a second year at the State House to address this. No final plan yet in place. So let's talk about this. Let's get plugged into this energy discussion about what needs to happen here at the State House. We've invited Oran Smith from the Palmetto Institute, to Palmetto Promise Institute, to talk about that. And you have some notions about how this could be done appropriately, efficiently, to make sure that when all three of us and everyone watching flip the switch, that something happens.
We still have power in the studio.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Well, you know, I perceive that the Senate and the House may be going in slightly different directions. The House needs to... Never happens. I don't think that's an old song that goes, the Senate hates the House hates the Senate. It appears that the House is very interested in gas, a gas plant. And building the gas plant will supply a lot of energy. Of course, the reason we need this energy, as you said, is the state is growing in population, but also in an industry. Yeah. So we're attracting a lot of industry, and according to U-Haul studies, we're the #1 most U-Hauled destination in the country. So people are moving here. So between the rates and the folks at the residential level and the industrial level, that's a lot of juice that we've got to come up with.
So 15 years ago, from 15 years ago till now, we've raised the population of South Carolina by 1 million. In the next 15, we're looking at another 1 million.
And that's from Ohio alone.
you know, that in Quebec. So when you look at that and you look at the industries that have come in, they're tech-heavy industries and they're manufacturing. Both of them require a lot of energy to do the things that they do. Where are we falling short? Where are we seeing that need arising even more so? The governor talked about it in the State of the State.
Yes. The governor kind of laid down the law, so to speak, and said we've got to do something about this. I mentioned the House. I think the House is very much into this idea of a very large gas generation facility. The Senate seems to want to open things up a bit more. At least some in the Senate seem to be leaning more toward market reforms, having some competition within the energy sector. Market. So one of those two is most likely going to be the leader, coming out of the clubhouse. We'll see. They're going to have to find a way forward, because right now, I think the preponderance of the Senate and the preponderance of the House, one's more into competition, one's more into this more monopoly utility oriented plan. So we'll have to see how that works out.
And one of our solutions isn't sitting but a few miles outside of this studio. Those 2 abandoned plants that maybe are half done in Jenkinsville at the VC Summer site that were abandoned nearly a decade ago. We pumped billions into that as ratepayers for a job that just sits there rotting. But those half done, let's say, units, 2 of them, continue to come up in conversations.
Well, it does. And I think it's because it's coming up in conversation for other units that have been abandoned or taken out of service around the country. So some folks said, hey, if they can restart the one in Pennsylvania, the one in New York, if Google can do this or Meta can do that, maybe there's some opportunity here. And there was a team that went to Jenkinsville and took a look at those 2 reactors. VC Summer 1 is running, as it always has been. 2 and 3 were never finished. And they did an analysis and they said 2 and 3 are not really in that bad a shape, as bad as it could have been.
Sure.
So that was moderately good news.
So that was part of the agreement, that you've got to keep this stuff somewhat in repair, or at least keep it going, so that if we decide to do this. So you've got Senator Tom Davis out of Beaufort, who has really started beginning to push this. Putting 2 more nuclear reactors, considered to be clean energy,
absolutely,
back onto the grid in South Carolina really does help with that. But there are other alternative energy sources that are out there.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we're coming back to this market question. Do we really want to market? So if you were to picture this, we're looking at a map of the United States, and you were to see a shaded area where there's competition, where there's some kind of transmission organization where all of the utilities in that area share transmission, and you look at the Southeast and it's dead. It's a dead spot. The Southeast does not have a lot of cooperation. You only have one choice. I don't know about you, but if you look at your power bill, it doesn't say, would you like to stay with Dominion or would you like to try Duke? You don't have that kind of a choice. And some areas have retail choice as well. I'm looking at Georgia in particular, because in Georgia, if the load, which is fancy energy talk for how much you're pulling off the grid, in Georgia, if your load is a certain level, then you get to shop. You get to shop amongst all the providers in that state. And oddly enough, right here in the Midlands of South Carolina, I know a gentleman whose job is to, on the basis of these new shopping areas, he goes in and shops all of the options for them, finds them the best deal, and this is his living. He makes a living doing this.
But as it is right now, though, Oran, we have to rely upon the Public Service Commission to hear from the utilities who come in and say, well, listen, we've spent this much money. We're spending this much on what it takes to generate power, to build power plants, to buy the gas that needs to be done. It used to be coal. And so how do we have any level of understanding? And is there anything that can be done to give us a greater level of understanding of, are they being honest with us? Because we don't really get to see what's going on the inside.
Well, see, this is the controversy, because if there's not competition, everyone has the three pieces. You know, they have the generation, they have the transmission, and the distribution. That's how electricity gets from a plant to us, those three phases. And if they're vertically aligned and they have different territories that don't overlap, you know, another great idea would be, why not, if a seller of electricity, which would be a utility, and a buyer of electricity, a consumer, what if they were to decide that they wanted to do business with one another, even though that utility might not actually be in that area, if the utility is willing to bring the power to the person? I call it willing buyer, willing seller. Why would that not be a thing? So there's so many different options that we can look at for competition, and we haven't talked about energy imbalance markets yet. That's where the utilities on a voluntary basis work together to trade electricity in nearly real time, so that you always know you've got the best price, literally on a moment's notice. And we have that in some other parts of the country too. Don't have it in the Southeast. Southeast is monopoly world, unfortunately.
So something else for the House and Senate to bang heads over.
And they'll definitely.
And they will.
And they will.
And they will.
Because to your point, they've got two very different viewpoints about how they want to address this. I'm going to have a deeper conversation with Dr. Smith in one of our extended sessions here of Connect to the Capitol. So make sure you check that out online at watchfox.com. Here on this extended time of Connect to the Capitol, we're going to be talking about energy for a few minutes. It's been a big topic that's gone on. The governor talked about it during his State of the State address. The South Carolina House of Representatives has put together a really large bill that talks about a number of different issues that have to do with energy. You're feeling it there at home because of the prices that you pay every time you get that bill that walks through the door, showing you exactly how much money you're putting back towards big projects that the monopoly and the utilities are putting out there right now. Joining us for this special segment, Dr. Oran Smith of the Palmetto Promise Institute. Oran, we've had a lot of conversations about a lot of things that have to do with powering South Carolina. By the time we get to 2040, we'll have another 1 million people in the state of South Carolina. We've got big industries that are coming in. So how in the world do we actually begin to address the real issues? The House has one idea, the Senate has another.
Yeah, well, you know, this wasn't that much of a problem not too long ago, because South Carolina wasn't really growing. But since South Carolina has been discovered, you know, U-Haul did a rating that said more people are moving into South Carolina than anywhere else. And that doesn't even count, as you said, in industry. So between industry and residential pull on the grid, we have a lot of energy we're going to have to come up with pretty quickly. And fortunately, those who have ability to cast votes in the legislature, our elected representatives, seem to be in tune with that finally, and that's being discussed. Last year, an energy bill, very long energy bill in words, was introduced by the House. The Senate had a little different idea. and now we're kind of in that situation nearly again.
So the clock basically ran out last legislative session. The House came back in at the beginning of this session, and Speaker Oran Smith basically put his foot on the gas, no pun intended, and said, we're going to get an energy bill passed. What in the world was included in that? And how does that compare itself to what you hear coming out of the Senate?
Yes, well, first of all, one thing good that we've got going for us is legislative sessions are 2 years. So last time, all the action happened at the end of the second year. Here, we're in the first year of the session, so we've really got 2 years to get this done before the bill is dead. But the bill coming out of the House was clearly a bill, I'm back to your gas analogy, it was very much about gas. It was about building a very large gas plant. And what that means is the gas powers the plant to create steam. Steam turns turbines. Turbines generate electricity. And that's how it comes to our homes and businesses. So that was mainly what the House seemed to be trying to do. Though the House did open the door to some other options as well, which they had not done in years past. So that was very positive. I perceive that as a moving in the direction of the Senate motion.
So in that particular case, there are new technologies that are coming out that really are new all around. Things that are existing today that weren't even thought about to the average person, to the average consumer. What are some of those things that they're looking at? And can they get onto the grid?
Yes. Well, of course, we have renewables. That's solar and wind, which has been around for a while. And a lot of industrial customers, which are known as the clean energy folks, they really want to use renewables. They want solar. They want wind power. But then there's some other things that have kind of come, I say, very nicely out of left field. One of those is known as SMRs. An SMR, that stands for Small Modular Reactor. And if you've ever watched any naval movies, submarine movies that have to do with more recently built submarines, these are nuclear submarines. They have small modular reactors that power these submarines. And they're operating all over the world by the United States Navy, the British Navy, navies around the world. So what if we were to have, say, a particular data center, and data centers, that's technology,
right,
helps us with AI functioning properly. What if a data center were to have a modular nuclear reactor out back? So we're using the technology that they use in a submarine, which is proven,
right,
to power these data centers. That I find very exciting. And I just happened to notice one of the broadcast network affiliates in Charlotte yesterday was reporting that Duke Energy Carolinas, which is a part of the Duke network,
right,
they're actually talking about small modular reactors. Haven't been built in America yet.
Except for nuclear submarines. And in that particular case, then, we're taking technologies that we know work, mm-hmm, and applying them then to specific needs that are out there. A data center, like what you might see with Amazon or Google or Microsoft, those technology centers are extremely high users of electrical power.
Yes, they really drink in the load, as they say.
And so if they're able to have that sort of small modular reactor, that could do a lot to basically power that and take some pressure off the power grid.
Yes, that is the theory. And in some cases, the small modular reactor generation would not necessarily be placed onto the grid. It could be connected directly to the industry that needs it, without putting it on the grid.
Almost
so this is revolutionary.
Almost like when the power goes out and you put your generator on at the house.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're generating. They're talking about then generating power that is for a specific location.
Yes, because before, and again, it was controversial. You got to understand the utilities point of view. You have these solar panels on your house. Congratulations. What if we really don't want your solar power to be brought onto the grid so that we kind of pay you back? The utilities find that annoying. I understand that. But in most cases, you don't have solar power on the roof of a home that's powering that home. It's being contributed to the grid.
Right.
So the grid issue, whether we lean into that or we both lean into that and welcome some of these off-grid or what they call behind-the-meter type options, now we're talking about Because we need a lot of options. We need more and more options.
So as it is right now, the utilities in South Carolina are responsible for the production of energy, but we have all of these other sources. You've got solar. You've got some folks who are solar who are not part of Duke. They're not part of Dominion. They're not part of Santee Cooper. How do they get onto the grid, and how do we keep pricing that is affordable for us? Because every time I hear the heat turn on at the house on a cold day, I begin to start feeding dollars into the machine.
Absolutely. Well, I think you and I have talked about Senator Tom Davis. Senator Davis probably knows more about energy than anyone else in the Senate, I would think, because he's made it his business to know that.
Right.
So generation is something he's very interested in, and he talks a lot about independent power producers, those who produce power who may not necessarily be utilities. So the situation in the state right now is every person who's a customer is assigned to a specific utility. We don't really have this with anything else. I mean, your cell phone provider, you're not told you must use X provider because you live in a certain area. We need to get to the point where there's competition perhaps at the retail level, as there is in some state, or the wholesale level, so that with the competition, prices can come down.
But there's a lot of pushback on that from the big utility companies. They're not really wanting to do that. Can the grid handle it? And then there's the other side of this, and this is what most folks don't understand. So as we talk about this, utilities have a guaranteed 10%, what they call a return on equity. So if they spend $1 billion on developing a new facility, then they're guaranteed by state law to get $100 million back off of that.
Well, yes, anything that is used and usable. So the way they base their rates is what generation is out there. So the cost of a nuclear facility, say if VC Summer 2 and 3 are restarted, if they are completed, if they are a part of a utility, the determination for how much the utility will receive will be based on the generation and be based on that asset. It's very asset oriented. You can't imagine doing any other business based on the asset cost, but that's how utilities work. So the question is, what is some low-hanging fruit? What are some things that we could do that would be innovative? I would say small modular is one, but the technology is not quite here yet. I think it's coming, but it's not quite here. A couple of other options, if I may. First of all, is an energy imbalance market. An energy imbalance market is simply when a group of utilities voluntarily cooperate, and they make sure that the power that they are putting onto the grid is coordinated so that power is traded in nearly real time so that the best price is always achieved and a proper level of energy is always achieved. So in South Carolina, maybe Santee Cooper, Dominion, Duke, all of these, the cooperatives, electric co-ops, South Carolina, which have a relationship with both Duke and Santee Cooper. These could be trading energy in real time on a Palmetto energy imbalance market, and that's one of the ideas that's in play.
So that if the need for if energy loads are really heavy, then they can basically buy and sell at the lowest rate to each other.
Yes.
And guarantee that we've got the lowest rates that are out there.
Right, because otherwise, they call it vertically integrated. You have a generator, a transmitter, and a distributor. We've got 4 of those roughly in South Carolina, each independent. A more thoughtful approach would be for them to voluntarily be able to cooperate so that those assets are used to their fullest extent and prices are forced as low as they could go.
I guess that would also then mean that these new technologies that could come in and grid improvements all have an ability to tap into that same system.
Yes, would be a much freer system. You'd have these independent power producers, these small modular reactors that may not be technically connected to the grid.
Right.
They could be supplying individual industries. It's a much freer market, something that the Southeast uniquely does not have. Every other part of the country has some form of either retail or wholesale competition.
So we're halfway through the first half of this legislative session. The House has done its stuff. They've sent it over to the Senate. prognosticate. We're going to put the old Jimmy the Greek, for those of you who remember. We're going to put a little Jimmy the Greek prognostication on this one real quick and ask, how likely are we to see that level of cooperation between the House and the Senate? Will we see something go through? The governor pushed for it in the state of the state. Where are we right now?
Well, it's a little dangerous to say this early, but the tort reform issue is very hot right now, and the Senate has been spending some time trying to decide where they want to be as a body. I think the energy issue would be very similar. You will have those that are very much in favor of asking the utilities, you utilities, you're under a lot of stress. You're being asked to provide energy, and in some cases you've had to turn down a plant that the Department of Commerce might have been recruiting.
Right.
Scenario of that nature. We need to help you. What do you want? Now that's one view. The other view is, what are some things we can do to provide more competition and have you work together more effectively?
It will not be a conversation that ends anytime soon.
Yes.
Dr. Oran Smith, thanks so much for making this a part of our conversation. And as we have more conversations along these lines, we hope that you will continue to join us here on our Connect to the Capitol extra segments. And we look forward to sharing more information with you as the legislative session continues. Thanks for watching.